we continue our lectures. Actually, if you note that I actually wanted to start this as a first lecture. So the earlier two lectures were just a preparation, and actually earlier two lectures in principle, they are all connected in the first 7 chapters of Atiyah McDonald. All right, so let us start without wasting much time today. So let K be a field and A be a K algebra of finite type. That means A is a residue class algebra of a polynomial ring over K infinitely many variables. So that is, there exists a surjective K algebra homomorphism from polynomial ring in n variables over K to the ring A, and images of capital Xi are small xi, and this map is surjective. That is the meaning of it's an algebra of finite type. Also, sometimes you may read in some other books, and also I may say sometimes that this is a fine algebra over K. So today I want to prove very important Noether's normalization lemma. And I will show you, I will deduce many consequences from here, which are more geometric in nature. So this is proved by Amy Noether in 1926, and this she proved it because she was studying ring of invariants. I will not go much into that right now, and I will keep referring this as a NNL, Noether's normalization lemma, and I am first going to prove what is called a classical version. You will see it is very simple, but it has many consequences. In fact, whatever we assumed in earlier supplements, like various formulations of Hilbert, Knudsen, and Zarts, we will deduce all of them from here. So even if you have not read their proofs in Atiyah McDonald's book, you will have the proofs here. Many of the formulations of HNS, they are also in the exercises of Atiyah McDonald's book. So Atiyah McDonald's book, if you have read only the text, it has no meaning. We have to do exercises also. Similarly, in this course. All right, in this Noether normalization lemma is actually is in exercises in Atiyah McDonald's book. All right, so what is our notation? We have a finite type algebra over a field. Then the assertion is there exist m elements in A, Z1 to Zm, such that Z1 to Zm are algebraically independent over K. That means the substitution homomorphism from the polynomial algebra in m variables over K to the subalgebra generated by Z1 to Zm, Zi going to small zi, this is a K algebra isomorphism. That means the kernel of the substitution homomorphism is 0. That means there is no polynomial. It goes to 0 here after substituting capital Zi equal to small zi. That is the meaning of algebraically independent over K. And the second condition is A is integral over the subalgebra generated by Z1 to Zm. Moreover, if this given xi's are algebraically dependent over K, then this m has to be smaller than m. All right, so let us prove this. This proof is very simple and interesting. This proof is the proof I am going to give depends on this lemma, which is also called a tilting lemma. you will see why is it called a tilting lemma in the next one page. So what is the lemma? Lemma says that if you have a field and polynomial ring in n variable and you have a non-zero, non-constant polynomial f, then you can find it, you can make it a monic. What does that mean? That means you can find an K-algebra automorphism of this polynomial ring in n variables so that the last variable is fixed and the earlier variables go to some elements yi's such that this f becomes monic in that xn with coefficients in the polynomials in the y1 to yn minus 1. These y1 to yn minus 1 are also obviously algebraically independent. That is clear because this is an automorphism. Anyway, so that is f is monic in xn with coefficients in the polynomial ring in y1 to yn minus 1. So how are you going to prove this? So we will prove that there exist positive integers gamma 1 to gamma n minus 1 such that if I define the automorphism like this, if I define a K-algebra homomorphism like this, xn is going to xn and xi is going to yi, where yi is xi minus xn power gamma I for 1 to n minus 1. So a priori this is a algebra homomorphism, but it is clear that this is an automorphism just because you can provide an inverse directly. You see, this is the inverse. Xi going to xi plus xn gamma I. So this is the inverse of this. That is very easy to check. So this is apparently an automorphism. These guys are because these variables, earlier variables are only disturbed by adding some power of xn. And now we want to check that if I want to check that fn is monic in xn or this. These are the new variables. I call it variables because it's an automorphism. Later on there are some more comments which will also throw some light on what we were doing in our college days. All right, so proof. I want to check it is f has become monic in xn with coefficients in ky1 to yn minus 1. So for each index, so now the polynomial in n variables, so it contains monomials like this. So for each tuple with entries in the natural numbers, you have this monomial. This is actually notation one uses from calculus. So polynomial, every polynomial looks like then finite sum of such monomials with coefficients in the field K. But I will remove, I can assume clearly that all these coefficients are in non-zero because zero coefficient will throw away that term. So it looks like this, and this big alpha, this is a finite set of some tuples with entries in n. So just substitute x1 equal to y1 plus xn power gamma 1. Remember, we are looking for gamma 1, gamma n minus 1. So I just substituted. We want to choose. Now I want to choose these gammas so that f is monic in xn. Now how am I going to choose it? You expand this. So let us, when you expand this, so what is the gamma degree of the monomial alpha? I have denoted by omega alpha. What is that? Because this will be counted gamma 1 times alpha 1 plus so on so on, gamma n minus 1 times alpha n minus 1, and this is alpha n. This is the monomials will appear here. Yi's I am not concerned because I want them as a coefficient. So I want to choose my gamma 1 to gamma n minus 1 such that all these gamma degrees are different. So when I expand these, all these monomials will have different degrees. And therefore, if I take maximum of that, that will be, I want to choose gamma in such a way that that monomial is a pure power of xn. If we can manage that, then we will be done. All right, so we want to choose gamma 1 to gamma n minus 1 such that this omega alpha and omega beta, they are different for different alpha betas. So for example, I can take gamma equal to g power I, where g is an integer, positive integer, which is bigger than all the components of all these alphas which occur in this sum. So it is supremum of all alpha j's, where alpha is a tuple which occur in this big alpha and all the components of that. Then what will happen? Then this omega alpha is this sum. So I have written now ulta. I have written the reverse way. You will see why. I have written in the reverse way. Gamma 1 is g, gamma 2 is g square, and so on. And gamma n minus 1 is g power n minus 1. And so this one is a g-adic expansion of this number, omega alpha. Because these alpha n, alpha 1, alpha n minus 1, they are digits. So therefore they are uniquely determined. You see, that is g equal to 10 is what we were doing in the school. But it is clear that you can do it for g bigger than equal to 2. For any positive integer bigger equal to 2, we can have, for any natural number, there is a g-adic expansion that will just simply, you can get simply that by using repeated use of division algorithm. And these digits are uniquely determined then. So then this, therefore these omega alphas are different because they are, if alpha is different from beta, then this coordinate, at least one of them is different, and therefore digits will be not equal, and therefore omega alpha and omega beta will be different. So now you take, these are finitely many omega alphas because capital alpha is finite, and therefore you take d to be the maximum of them. And then now when you expand this will be xn power omega beta, then xn, and then there are smaller powers. But this is clearly monic in xn, and coefficients are in y1 to yn minus 1. See, when you expand this binomial coefficient, power of xn will be precisely xn power omega alpha. And the maximum among them is this. And so we have achieved to make the given polynomial f non-constant, monic in xn with coefficients in the remaining y1 to yn minus 1. Now let us see some remarks. Suppose K is an infinite field, then actually we can do better. And that is why this name tilting lemma. Because what happens in that case, I am going to find, you can even choose a linear change of variable. That is, yi's, I can choose a linear in x's, this particular linear polynomial in x's. I can choose some ai's so that this y becomes monic in xn with coefficients in y1 to yn minus 1. So why that? We write this f non-zero polynomial as a sum of homogeneous components. If capital Fj's are homogeneous of degree j, and d is the biggest homogeneous component, that is d is the degree of f. Then remember identity theorem for polynomials that says I can choose, there exists at least a1 to n in k cross, so that fd evaluated at this is non-zero. This is precisely identity theorem, which you will find in supplement 0 with proof. So because this is homogeneous, I can even replace this small ai by n and normalize this to 1. So that means I have this polynomial homogeneous evaluated at this, and I have changed the names for ai. I have replaced them by this. So this constant a is non-zero. And now you simply take yi equal to this and then just repeat. So this is monic. So linear change will do, but here the choice, for the choice, you need a field to be infinite. And what does this mean? That means if you imagine in a plane x1, x2, that means that x1 I have changed it to this linear. That means that is no more a perpendicular axis, but it has become a axis slanted. That is why it is called tilted. Tilted. When you draw a geometric picture, the axis is not, you see, in the geometry, unless it is, there is a perpendicularity. Our geometry, there is no perpendicularity. There is no parallel. Because perpendicularity and parallelness, that should come with some inner product, etc. But we have arbitrary. So linearly independent just means they are crossing. So this also justifies the name tilting lemma. Tell me, if you find I am going faster, you should stop here. So this is very, very important concept, and this is not new to us. I just want to sensitize that we have done this earlier many times. For example, I have written now in a matrix format. So a fine transformation of the polynomial algebra is this kind of special maps, special automorphisms. There are automorphisms of the polynomial algebra as a K algebra. So the variables x1 to xn, I write them, this capital X is a column. And these I send it to matrix A times that this column vector plus some other column vector B, B1 to Bn. This is precisely how you have written your system of linear equations. So where A is a Aij matrix, and because I want to start with the automorphism, so that is equivalent to saying the determinant of this matrix, this coefficient matrix, is a non-zero element in the field K. Better to say is K cross, that is units in K. Because if your base field is no field anymore, and if it is a ring, then the matrix is invertible if and only if the determinant is non-zero is not enough. You have to say determinant is a unit. Therefore, instead of saying non-zero, I better want to use this notation, K cross, where cross always means units in the ring. Okay, for example, if you take A to be the identity matrix, then this phi is just a translation map. Translation by this. So xi going to xi minus bi or plus bi. If such maps are also called affine, because this is affine geometry, affine linear geometry. So if B is 0, then there is no translation. That means actually phi is a linear map. So if K is infinite, then what did we do in the above to make the polynomial monic? You see, I have the matrix I have taken is 1, 1, 1 on the diagonal, and just the last column I have, it is minus a1 to minus an minus 1, where ai's are this. So this is a special affine transformation, though we made the polynomial to be monic. So here also it gives me opportunity to make a comment about conic sections. That means in a college days, two variable polynomials over real numbers, assuming irreducible, we have changed the coordinates. And because R was infinite, we have actually changed them with a linear change, so that our given irreducible polynomial in two variables of degree 2 became either that parabola polynomial y minus x square or xy minus 1 or the ellipse. These we proved by using this language actually. So it was, I remember in a college books now, they are doing it very mechanically without understanding what they are doing. All right, so this was, if you go and see old book, you will find such language there. All right, the third remark is, So,
Sir,
yes,
excuse me. We have a question, I guess.
yes, please.
Sir, here could you please explain once again that why are we taking
1 minute. Can you put on your video, Gargi?
yes, sir.
Yes. Tell me.
Sir, here could you please explain that why are we taking determinant as a unit? Like why it won't work if we'll just take it to be non-zero?
You see, because if you take, for example, 2, 2 on the diagonal, let's say 2, 2 on the diagonal, or 2, 1 in the diagonal, 2 by 2 case, 2, 1 on the diagonal,
Yes, sir.
diagonal matrix over integers.
Okay.
The determinant is 2.
Hanji.
And what is the inverse? Inverse will have 1 over 2 in the entry, right?
Yes, sir.
So that is, there are no more integers.
Yes, sir.
So if you, the matrix invertible means what? That means there is another matrix, so that A times B equal to identity matrix and also B times C.
Yes, sir.
Exactly like how did you define a unit in a ring?
That there exists an element B such that AB is identity and BA is also identity.
Yes. So you are in a matrix ring, they are unit means they are invertible. That is the definition of invertible matrix. And that unique B is called the inverse of A. It is now a matter how do we find the inverse and how do you test that some matrix has the inverse or not. And that you test by saying that if you compute a determinant of that matrix, and if that matrix happen to be a unit in that ring, then only it will be invertible.
Okay.
Okay. So that is that. Does it satisfy?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now shall we continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Now you can put up your video if you want. All right. So third one is this also I raised this issue in a supplement only, but maybe it is not. I don't know why, how you might have not read it. So look at the automorphism group of this polynomial algebra. That means the elements are K-algebra automorphisms of the polynomial algebra, and it's a group under composition, because composition of two algebra automorphisms, again algebra automorphism. And now one would like to know how do we describe the elements. For example, we have seen in case of earlier, in case of two variables also or many variables also, there are nonlinear automorphisms also, like this. These are nonlinear automorphisms. If gammas are bigger than 1, these are not linear, but they are automorphisms. So there are nonlinear automorphisms also. So for example, can one describe this group? What are exactly all elements in this group? For example, n equal to 1, this is a simple exercise. They're all only one variable. So all automorphisms are given by x going to some linear polynomial like this in x, where a is non-zero. N equal to 1, it's a difficult theorem, but very, very useful theorem to prove what is called Jacobian conjecture. And even that to state here, I will need more time and space, so I don't want to do it, but it's a difficult theorem. And where do you find such a theorem? This theorem, for example, you can read in these notes, TFR lecture notes, expansion techniques in algebraic geometry. The lectures were given by Abhyankar and notes by Balwant Singh. So this is very interesting to read it, and it doesn't require much background, but on the other hand, it requires a tremendous amount of patience. All right, so n bigger equal to 3, the structure is not known. So that's a big problem. The structure of this automorphism group is not known. So there is a lot to do there. All right, so but we want to continue. All right, now we have not yet proved NNL. See, NNL is we want to find elements Z1 to Zm such that they are algebraically independent over K and A is integral over this. So that because they are algebraically independent, the advantage will be this is a polynomial algebra and this A will be integral over the polynomial algebra. This is a sub-algebra, so it's injective. This is the integral extension. And therefore, what we noted in the last lecture, what will happen is dimension of A will be equal to dimension of the polynomial algebra in M variables. And if we manage to compute polynomial ring of dimension of the polynomial algebra or a field in M variables, and we wanted it to be M, and if you prove that, then we would have proved, we would have computed the dimension of the arbitrary algebra of finite type, and immediate consequence will be it is finite, full dimension is finite, which is a big one. Okay, so we have to prove this. So let us prove that. All right, so proof of NNL, this proof which I am writing here is due to Nagata. So I am going to prove it by induction on N. What is N? N is the number of algebra generators for the given finite type algebra over K. That is N. So suppose x1 to xn, these algebra generators, they were algebraically independent over K. Then there is nothing to prove because I can take M equal to N and Z equal to Xi. And the second condition is automatic because A is integral over itself. So therefore, we may assume that x1 to xn are algebraically dependent over K. What is dependent? That means the substitution homomorphism is not injective. That means dependent. That means there is a non-constant polynomial in the kernel. That means there exists a non-zero polynomial, non-constant, such that when I plug it, this x1 to xn in that substitute, then the polynomial becomes zero. This is what we are assuming because they are algebraically dependent. Other cases over. Now I will use the tilting lemma, and what will I assume? I will assume this f is monic in the last variable with coefficient in the these y1 to yn minus 1, where yi's are defined by using xi. They are just disturbed. Y1 is x1 minus xn power somebody and so on. So it became monic like that. So now I am going to substitute this in f, capital Xi equal to small xi. And what will happen to then capital Yi's? Capital, remember, capital Yi's are some special polynomials in x1 to xn. So there also I substitute xi's, small xi. Then these yi, small yi's is capital Yi evaluated at this. All right. So here I want to suggest or make a comment that for me, whenever I use capital letters, they are all variables for me, indeterminates, algebraically independent elements. Small elements are not necessary. And this should be reflected in your writing also. Otherwise, Kriti will have a lot of problem. She will ask you whether is it a variable or is it an element or what. So be careful when you write your assignments. Give a little more time. Don't be in a hurry. Take your time, but be careful in your writing. So, substitute this capital Xi equal to Xi, small xi, and capital Y equal to small y. And multiply this equation by A inverse. What was A? A was a unit anyway. So I can multiply by its inverse. So, and this is 0 because f of x1 to xn is 0. So it became like this. So this is obviously an integral equation for xn over what ring? Over this subalgebra. Subalgebra generated by y1 to yn minus 1. This is a subalgebra of A. So this proves that xn is integral over this k y1 small y1 to yn minus 1. And therefore, look at A is x1 to xn equal to also k y1 to yn minus 1 xn because this y1 to yn minus 1 and xn along with xn, they generate the polynomial algebra. It's an automorphism. Therefore, by passing on to the quotient also, they will generate. Therefore, this equality here, this equality. And this one, this contains this subalgebra generated by y1 to yn. This should be yn minus 1. So this is integral because xn is integral. And algebra generated by integral elements is also integral. This is chapter 5. We have studied Atiyah MacDonald basic properties of the integral extension. Now, by induction hypothesis, I am going to apply induction to this y1 to yn minus 1. This is yn minus 1. No? This algebra. This is subalgebra now generated by n minus 1 element. So I can apply induction hypothesis and find z1 to zm, which are algebraically independent over k, and this one is integral over subalgebra generated by k z1 to zm. This is induction hypothesis. So what do we get? This, the subalgebra of this extension is integral by 2 in the hypothesis, induction hypothesis, and then this one is integral over that we have achieved. Therefore, integral extension of integral extension is again integral extension, and we are done. So note this m actually it is less equal to n minus 1 because we have chosen they are algebraically independent inside this. Therefore, and n minus 1 is strictly less than n. So we have also noted that this m has to be strictly less than n, which was a part of this assertion. See, if they are algebraically dependent, then m has to be smaller than n. All right. So shall I wait for 1 minute and wait for your answer, wait for your questions if you have any in this proof. It is very, very, very important. And now you will see lot of consequences. Whole lecture today and next lecture, we will only deduce consequences from this statement. So anybody has any question? I hope you are awake. Shall I continue?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let's continue. I wait for your answer because I want some response. Because your response is very important for me and it will also be inspiring. If you sleep, I will also sleep. All right, so let us continue. These are consequences of NNL. And these consequences are first consequences. I will draw more second level consequences probably in the next lecture. So I keep calling them corollaries. So corollary 1, this is in the supplements, I would have called it HNS 3. It is also, if you see the literature, it is called Zariski's lemma because Zariski was the first to prove this. So what is the statement? This is also, some people also call it field theoretic form. So let L over K be a field extension. And if the K algebra L, if it is of finite type, then it is finite over K. In general, finite type do not imply finite, but if that algebra is a field, then it does. That is the content of this corollary. In particular, finite extensions are algebraic. Finite field extensions are algebraic, therefore L is algebraic over K. So proof by NNL, because it is finite type, there exist algebraically independent elements Z1 to Zm in L such that L over this is an integral extension. That is what NNL we proved it. But now the advantage is this extra assumption we have is this L is a field. All right. Since L is a field, this bottom thing also has to be field. An integral extension of integral domains, upper one is the field, if and only if down one is a field. That is very easy consequence from the definition of integral elements. So, but L is a field, therefore this has to be a field, but this is a polynomial algebra in M variables. They are algebraically independent, means they are polynomial. This is polynomial algebra. But when can a polynomial algebra will be a field? Only when there is no variable there. Variables will not have inverses there. So therefore the only chance is M is 0. But once M is 0, then this is what? This is integral extension. That means algebraic, and this is finite type. That means it is finitely generated over the field, and therefore an integral. So in general, you know, finite type plus integral is finite. Therefore, the finite type L is finite type over K given, and its integral also. Therefore, it's finite over K. All right. All right. Second corollary. Second corollary is
Sir,
also
I have a
called.
question.
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Why is it called
Can
a
you put
theorem?
on, please? Can you please put on your video?
Yeah, sure. Sir.
Yes.
Sir,
Yes,
why is it called the theorem of zeros? Because here is no zeros involved apparently.
You see, this is a weak form. So null standards will come, and then you will see the zeros there.
Okay.
See, these formulations are different formulations, and you can actually, if you state them correctly, you can actually prove them they are equivalent. That is where I gave a reference, that Kriti gave a reference, archive paper.
Yes.
So if you look at that paper, actually, they are all equivalent. One can deduce from each other. So therefore, if one of them justifies the name theorem of zeros, then that's why the same title carried over to everybody. All right?
Okay.
Okay. The next corollary 2, that is called a weak form, because apparently it looks weak. That is why it is called a weak form. So let A be a K algebra of finite type, and M is a maximal ideal. Then the residue field A mod M is a finite algebraic extension of K. In particular, if K is algebraically closed, then A by M has to be isomorphic to K as K algebras, because there are no algebraic extensions for an algebraically closed. All right, proof. K is contained in K because it's a K algebra, and this algebra is finite type, therefore it is generated by x1 to xn, finitely many element as an algebra, and there is a residue map here, A by M. So these small xi's are going to the bars, their residue class is mod M. If this is finite type, this is also finite type. Therefore, by corollary, 1, this is a field, A by M is a field, and it is finite type. Therefore, corollary says it is finite over K. In particular, it is algebraic. So that proves corollary 2. So next one. Now, in my supplement, I have called it HNS 4. And what was the statement? Let K be algebraically closed field and A be a K algebra of finite type. Then the K spectrum of A equal to SPM of A. This is maximal. That means, this means every max. So one containment is obvious. Every maximal ideal is of the form it is coming from the point in K power n. Let us prove this, and then you will realize why did I introduce notation which you felt complicated, and so on and so on. but now it will pay us a lot of things will get neatly presented and so on. Clarity will improve. Okay, recall. How did we define K spectrum? There are all those maximal ideals such that the residue field is isomorphic to K as a K algebra. So this K spectrum is a subset of the spectrum, a maximal spectrum. And we want to prove equality here with the assumption K algebraically close. So I want to prove the converse. That means given any maximal ideal, it should come from a point. That means it should be generated by this x1 minus a1, etc., etc. So therefore, I have written a short form here, which I will keep using in the rest of the course. That is ETPT. That is enough to prove that all these short forms I inherited from my teacher. So I want to prove enough to prove this inclusion because the other inclusion is by definition. So start with the maximal ideal. Then since K is algebraically close, look at the residue field. We have proved in earlier corollary that this is an algebraic extension of K. But K has no algebra, K is algebraically close field. Therefore, these are isomorphic as K algebras. And that means that is then by definition M has to be in the K spectrum. Right? M has to be in the K spectrum. So here I recalled this in particular row that I recalled here. So what did we do? We identified points in K power n to be the K spectrum of the polynomial algebra. This is the identification. And then this identification is because K is algebraically close. That is what we have done earlier. So therefore, in particular justifies. Remember here, the K spectrum definition is so. And there if you see, if you read my supplement 0 very carefully, it is very, very carefully developed and formally written the proofs. Printing mistakes and errors are welcome. The more you read, the more you like, and the less you read, the more you dislike. So choice is yours what to do. All right, so shall we continue? Any question? All right, so corollary 4. Corollary 4 is this was also there, but all these supplement 0 I have written, assuming that you know the proofs of these various formulations of HNS from a T. McDonald. If you see the algebraic proofs, there are many, many proofs for these statements, and one has to make a choice. What proof do you like? So,
Sir, I guess we had a question.
yes, please.
Somebody asked something.
Yes, who is it? Please ask.
Yes, sir, I need one clarification. The previous page slide.
Sorry?
The previous.
You want earlier? Hold
Yeah, this bijection is for any field, right? Bijection points and K spec. Oh, this is for max spec.
See here, in this one, no? This is the SPM.
Okay, okay. I thought it was K spec. Okay, fine.
This one is for any field.
Yeah, it's clear, sir. I just missed one.
All right, corollary 4. If you have A and B as K algebras, I am not saying both are. I am not assuming they are finite type. But suppose B is finite type. Only one is finite type, B, and you have a algebra homomorphism from A to B. Then, corresponding to this ring homomorphism, it will induce the map phi star we have seen in the last lecture, which will be associated to this on the spectra. Now, what is the map? Now, what is the statement? This map will map the maximal spectrum of B inside the maximal spectrum of A. That means phi star of SPMB is contained in SPM. That is the statement. Okay, so that means, so we want to prove this inclusion. So take a point here, Y. Y is in SPMB and X is its image. X is phi star Y. and I want to prove this is in the maximal. I want to prove what? I want to prove X is in SPMA. But what is X? By definition, it is phi star Y. Phi star Y definition is you take the pyramidal corresponding to this Y and contract it. So that is phi inverse of Py. And Py is from maximal spectrum of B. Therefore, Py is a maximal ideal in B. And I want to prove this X is a maximal ideal in B. Or equivalently, I want to prove this contraction is also maximal in A. So look at this diagram. This diagram is what? It's a commutative diagram of K algebras and K algebra homomorphisms. All homomorphisms are K algebra homomorphisms. All algebras are K algebras. And in this B by Py, this is a field because Y is a maximal ideal. And this is finite type. This field is a finite type over K because this B is finite type over K by assumption. I'm not saying anything about it. So this is a field which is finite type over this. And earlier corollary we have proved that this is algebraic over K. And this one is a subring in between because this is injective. This is injective. Phi bar is injective because precisely this Px is a contraction of Py. So precisely it is a kernel of phi bar. So this is also injective. So this integral domain, contraction of a prime is no big deal. This is integral domain because it's a subring of a field. Subring of a field may not be a field, but this extension is algebraic. Therefore, this has to be a field because you see this is algebraic. So this is integral domain, this is a field, this is algebraic means integral now. Integral. Therefore, this is also a field. Therefore, this is a field and that means that X is a maximum ideal. So very simple. Your proof should not be more than half a page. If it is more than half a page, it's complicated. Your definitions and your concept should be absolutely clear to write a proof. Otherwise, your proof will become more and more easier. All right. Obviously, this statement is not true if they were not K algebras, finite type K algebras, because you see example Z contained in Q. This is contraction of maximal is not maximal. Yes, please. Who is talking?
Yeah. So there, are we using a finite dimensional integral domain is a field or not?
I am not using finite dimensional integral domain. And moreover, there is no assumption on it. I am only using, you see here, this field is algebraic over this. Therefore, I say this field is integral over this integral domain. Because it satisfies a polynomial with coefficients in K, therefore it will be here also. Therefore, this is an integral extension where upper ring is a field, therefore down ring is a field. Yes? What is the name? Krishna, does it answer your question? Hello?
Actually, I missed corollary 2, so I'm trying to recap what was that statement.
You want to use corollary 2?
No, there it's written that we are using corollary 2, so I'm trying to. In the proof, you have written that.
Yeah, corollary 2 is algebraic.
Okay.
It's algebraic. K is algebraic. This A by M is a finite algebraic extension of K. That is where I'm using to B by Py. This extension, algebraic over K. B by Py is algebraic over K, that is corollary 2. All right, shall I go on?
Yes.
Okay. So corollary 5. Now I want to become little more geometric. What does that mean? That means I want to look more intimately with the Zariski topology on the spectrum and talk about closed sets, open sets, and so on. All right. So what is the statement? A is a K
Sir?
algebra. Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes, please.
Sir,
So-
is there any? Yes,
So
sir.
please
Yeah.
put on your video and tell me where are you from.
Yes. Hello.
Yes.
Am I audible right now?
Yes.
Sir, so is there any direct geometrical interpretation of that Noether normalization lemma?
Yeah, I will answer that, but I need to develop something first. So you
Okay.
are from IIT Chennai, if I remember correctly, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And you have studied a lot of abstract algebra geometry.
Yeah.
And you are looking for always geometric statements which correspond to algebraic statements, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, normalization lemma has very deeper geometric consequences. But as I said in the beginning, I am only drawing some first level consequences.
Okay, sir. Okay.
And what you are asking probably will come later.
Okay, sir.
Okay, all right. So let us continue. Corollary 5. If A is a K-algebra finite type and X is an element in the spectrum, with Zariski topology obviously, then the following are equivalent. This is another short form. TFAE, the following are equivalent. Only first time I have written the longer form. Now onwards I will not write. All right, the first condition is X is closed in spectrum. When I say that, that means the singleton X is closed. And we have seen earlier supplements or examples that this means that the prime ideal corresponding to X is a maximal ideal. That means X is an element in the maximal spectrum. That is the condition 1. 2, X is locally closed in the spectrum. What does locally closed means? When do you say a subset is locally closed in a topological space? That means it is closed in an open set. That means there exists a neighborhood U of X such that the singleton X is closed in U. That is the definition of locally closed. Right? That means there is a open set which contain X, so that singleton X is closed in that open set. And I want to prove that these two conditions are equivalent. All right. 1 implies 2 is trivial because the point is closed in the whole space. Therefore, I can take U to be the whole space. So that is a trivial matter. Converse, that is 2 implies 1, I want to prove. 2 implies 1 means I am assuming the point is locally closed in the spectrum. That means there exists a neighborhood U of X such that singleton U is closed in that U. So because we have seen that these special open sets, basic open sets are precisely DFs. I may shrink that open neighborhood to DF, and without loss I can assume this U is DF, and that means this X is a point in U means X is in DF. That means this F is not in the ideal corresponding to X, that is Px for some F. Then what do you want to prove from here? From here, I want to prove that X is closed in the spectrum. That is precisely one. That is what we want to prove. All right. So I have got hold of this F. So now look at A localized at F. That means you take the multiplicative set generated by F, 1F, F square, etc., and localize there. But this means this is same thing as A 1 over F. So this is the algebra. This AF is a algebra generated by 1 over F. And A is finite type over K. So therefore, this is also finite type over K generated by one more extra element, that is 1 over F. And remember, this was one of the exercise. The canonical map is iota star, which is spectrum of AF to DF, which is a subset of the spectrum. This is an open embedding onto DF. This was precisely, it was exercise which was in that supplement 0, right? This is open embedding means what? That means it is homeomorphism onto the image, and the image is open in the spectrum. These concepts are there for arbitrary topological spaces. When do you say a continuous map is an open embedding? That means it is a homeomorphism onto its image, and the image is open in that space on the right. Where this iota is the natural map, which is the localization, natural canonical map. And this is clearly also K-algebra homomorphism, because A is a K-algebra, A is also K-algebra, both are finite type, and this is a K-algebra homomorphism. So, and this is a homeomorphism here onto image, this is open. So this is an open set. So when I pull it back, this is singleton, therefore this also be singleton, because this map is a homeomorphism. And where do these belong? This will belong to the maximal spectrum. Why? Because we are assuming that this is the same X actually. It's only we are considering that X in this spectrum. So this one is in the maximal ideal. That is our assumption too. Because it's locally closed, that means this X is closed in this spectrum, closed in DF. This DF is homeomorphic to this. Therefore, this corresponding element is closed in this spectrum. But we have seen closed in the spectrum means it is an element in the maximal spectrum. This is assumption 2. And this maximal spectrum, both are finite type algebras, and this is a K-algebra homomorphism of finite K-algebras, finite type K-algebras. Therefore, the maximal spectrum will be mapped onto the maximal spectrum, inside the maximal spectrum. That was the earlier corollary for. Therefore, the point corresponding to this, which is X, will be a closed point in spectrum. Does it prove? That is what we wanted to prove. Now again, I will wait for half a minute, wait for you to ask questions, and then only continue, because this is very, very important corollary. You will see why. Yes, anybody has question? You have to answer yes or no. If you say yes, I am happy and I'll go on. If you say no, I will wait for your answer. But if you don't say either yes or no, then what do I do? Shall I go on?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you. That was Sai Priya, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, next now. Therefore, what does it open up? It opens up the following. You know, this corollary 5 has the assumption that A is a finite type algebra over a field. And this one is no big deal. We have seen for arbitrary commutative ring, prime ideal is closed in the spectrum if and only if it is maximal. That was no big deal. So one is tempted to study this condition too without this assumption, finite type algebras. That is what I'm going to do now. It's curious. What does this mean if I drop this assumption? And that will lead us to a good concept. All right. So what is proposition. So we now study the condition 2 in the spectrum of an arbitrary commutative ring algebraically. Because you see this condition 2, this is very topological condition. Locally closed points are close. Locally closed point that is studying. So I'm going to study locally closed points. What does it mean algebraically? That is the content of this proposition. So let A be an arbitrary commutative ring, then the following are equivalent. Every closed point, when is it close? That is studying. So arbitrary commutative ring, then the following two statements are equivalent. The statement 1, that is every locally closed point X is a closed point. Second condition, now see, this is a topological, this is a geometric condition. Every locally closed point is closed. There is no algebra there. Second condition, you see, every radical ideal A in A is intersection of maximal ideal C. This is pure algebraic condition. So what does that mean? Every radical ideal A, start with the radical ideal A. This is the intersection of maximal ideals. But which intersection? Obviously, it has to contain all those maximal ideals which contain these A. Because if A is intersection, then every maximal ideal will also occur here, which contain A, obviously. So what does these mean? These are written all A equal to intersection of all maximal ideals corresponding to the maximal ideals in A, which contain A, that means V of A, our notation. So what is paying for us for clarity is our earlier notation and earlier statements. So now the statement is clear. Before, as I kept saying earlier also, that before you embark on the exercises, please make sure that you understand the statements in the exercises. Understanding a statement is, I would say, even more important than a proof. Because if you understand a statement, it will find a way to prove. It will be dictated. Your understanding will dictate what to do. All right. So 1 implies 2. Actually, you see, I will prove negation 2 implies negation 1. You see the last line here? I am going to prove negation 2 implies negation 1. That will prove 1 implies 2. So I am going to assume negation 2. What is the negation 2? That means there is a radical ideal which is not intersection of maximal ideals. And then I want to get a contradiction to 1. All right. So, but we know any radical ideal in the ring A, in arbitrary ring, is an intersection of all those prime ideals which contain A. This was precisely, if you remember, formal Null-Standards, Shine Null-Standards. So every radical ideal is like that, we know. But we want to do more.
Sir,
Yes.
I just want to make a small clarification in the statement 2 here.
Yes.
So when you say every radical ideal A in A is the intersection of maximal ideals in A containing the ideal A, this is
Of
what
course,
you mean?
containing ideal A. If it is the intersection, each maximal ideal which occur here will contain.
Okay, it's just clarify. Okay, thanks.
When I write this, when I say this statement intersection, this intersection will obviously contain A, and intersection is containing each one of them. So this will be also in VA. If you want to be more specific, then you write here. It is not necessary to write. All right, Kriti.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we are assuming condition 2 is not true. That means for a radical, there is a radical ideal which is not intersection of maximal ideals. But we know that radical ideal is definitely intersection of prime ideals. That is formal Null-Standards. And if I prove, then I can assume that this one of the P here is not intersection of maximal ideals. Because if everybody is intersection of maximal ideals, then A will also be intersection of maximal ideals. So without loss, we may assume that A is a prime ideal. And that prime ideal, which is not intersection of maximal ideals. Suppose there is one prime ideal here, which is not intersection of maximal ideals. Then what do I do? Then I will pass on to the residue ring, A by P. And we may assume that A is integral domain. Because then the same condition is true there, because maximal ideals in A by P correspond to the maximal ideals in A which contain P. All right. So now we are, after passing on to the residue class ring, we are assuming A is the integral domain. And now in that integral domain, because we are assuming this P is not intersection of maximal ideals, the Jacobson radical is non-zero. So forget everything. We are very simple question now. We have an integral domain in which Jacobson radical is non-zero. Then we want to get contradiction to 1. I mean, we want to prove negation 1. All right. Jacobson radical is non-zero. Therefore, I can choose an element there which is non-zero. So F in MA, F is non-zero. All right. So what is A localized at F? A is integral domain. So A localized at F is also non-zero because F is non-unit. Because F is non-zero. This AF is non-zero. That is because F is non-zero. A is integral domain. So this is non-zero. Therefore, it has a maximal ideal. So maximal spectrum of AF is non-empty. That is, there exists. So what are the maximal ideals here? In any case, they are prime ideals. And they will come from a prime ideals of A which don't contain F precisely. Right? So this maximal ideal Q, this F cannot be in Q because it's a maximal ideal there. F is a unit here. So this Q will correspond, this F will correspond to DF. And this Q will definitely correspond to some prime ideal. And that prime ideal, when you localize that F, you get this Q. That is what I gone back to the D. So this Q will correspond to some localization of some prime ideal at F, and that X will not contain F, therefore X belong to DF. Is it clear what I translated? What does this mean? So X belong to DF. So this DF is open set in spectrum A. Therefore, this X is a locally closed point in the spectrum. Because singleton X belong to an open set. So that open set is DF intersection the spectrum. So it's locally closed. All right. So now I want to show you X is not closed. That will violate, that will prove negation of 1. So X is locally closed, we have justified. Now, to show that it is not closed in spectrum, I have to show that this cannot be a maximal ideal. But that is also clear because you see this F is not in Q because F belong to MA, the Jacobson radical. So this is not in this, and therefore this cannot be a maximal ideal here. Is that clear?
So why the Jacobson radical is non-zero if A is an integral domain?
What is an assumption we have? We are assuming that the given P is not intersection of maximal ideals in A.
Oh, okay.
So when you pass on to the residue class ring, The same thing happens to 0, no?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay. Now only I've written it here that X is not closed in the spectrum. That I want to see whether you understand. Yes, please.
Sir, this F is, I'm sorry, this Px is not in maximal spectrum. Is it because F is getting unit in AF? That's why F doesn't belong to Q and so on.
Q belong to the maximal spectrum of AF, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, this Q cannot contain F because this is maximal ideal and F is a unit here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. But we have to prove that the prime ideal corresponding to this Q in the original ring, that is not maximal. Why is that?
Because F was in MA. So F is contained in every maximal ideal, but F is not in PX.
Why?
Because in that case, PXF will be the whole ring A.
Yes, exactly. These PX do not contain F, whereas all maximal ideals in the ring A contain that F by this assumption. We have chosen that F in the Jacobson radical. Therefore, this P cannot be maximal. Therefore, it is not a closed point in such spectrum. All right. So, is it clear? This is very, very important. Now, then, before I go to a next page, I want all of you to be clear in this. I am sitting here for 2 minutes to hear from you the questions. But please ask me relevant questions. Sai Priya. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Is it clear?
Yes, sir. I'm just going through it once again.
Okay, who else? Let me see I want to see the names. How do I see the participant's name? Shall I make it smaller? Oh, here. Who do I know in the participants? Let me see first. Gargi, is it clear to you?
So I'm just going through this once.
Yes. Ponashri. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Is it clear to you?
Sir, I am reading the last few lines, then I will tell you.
Okay. Who else? Kriti?
Can you please quickly repeat it once? Just
Whole
the
proof?
gist of it.
Whole proof?
Yes.
Why don't you ask your difficulties? Manav, can you put on your video? Hello? Manav, where are you from?
Mumbai.
Mumbai where? Which institution?
IIT Bombay.
IIT Bombay where? Why did you put up your video?
Why did I what?
Put on your video essay. Can you tell me which point you have a difficulty? See, because
So the second paragraph mainly, once you choose F belonging to MA.
So we have reduced our assertion to A is the integral domain and Jacobson radical there is non-zero. Right?
Yes.
Now I choose a Jacobson radical is non-zero given, so I choose an element F there which is non-zero. Okay?
Yes, yes.
And then I localize at F. Then I get a non-zero ring because F is non-zero element in an integral domain. When I localize, I still get a non-zero ring. Right?
Yes.
Now here, therefore, because it's a non-zero ring, Krull theorem says the maximal spectrum is non-empty.
Yeah, that's fine.
So therefore there exists a maximal ideal there Q.
Yes.
But we know this Q is coming from some P in the original ring A. Because you know the prime ideal structure in the localization is precisely those prime ideals will survive from A, which will not intersect with the multiplicative set, which is here generated by F. So those P, this Q will come from some P. That I called it PX. But this F cannot belong to this P. Because otherwise, if it belongs to P, this will be a whole ring and Q will be a whole ring, which is not true. Therefore, this point corresponding to this P, that is X, which will belong to this open set DF. That means this X is a locally closed point because this belongs to this basic open set. And now I say this P cannot be maximal because if it were maximal, it will contain this F because F is in a Jacobson radical. And P will contain Jacobson radical if P is maximal.
Yeah,
Therefore,
that's fine.
Therefore, it is not a closed point. Very simple. Very, very simple if you start thinking geometrically. Open sets, closed sets.
Okay.
And obviously, this exercise, if you have not done, you please go back home and do it. The prime ideal correspondence under localization. And it gives you homeomorphism onto, it's an open embedding, right? This is very, very important. It's an open embedding. All right. So, shall we go on now?
Sir?
Yes.
Sir, like you said that closed points correspond to M spec of A. Similarly, can you say that locally closed points correspond to M spec of A for some F?
I already made that comment, no?
Yeah. I think you are using that fact repeatedly here, right?
See, locally closed means you can shrink this neighborhood and say that it belongs there.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So shall I go on? Purnashri. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Can I go on?
Yes, sir. Okay, it's fine now.
Clearly, you have understood, no?
Yes, sir.
Gargi,
Yes, sir. It's clear.
don't reluctantly say, please tell me if
No,
it
no.
is clear.
Clear.
It's very important. Sai Priya?
Yes, sir, now it's perfectly fine.
Okay. Anybody else? I want to get to know like this. I am going to ask questions like this in every lecture. All right. So what does it say? Locally closed implies closed. This condition you have translated in terms of the radical ideal. Every radical ideal should be intersection of maximal ideals. So, of course, we have not proved two. I only proved one implies two, right? I have to still prove two implies one. So, now I assume that every radical ideal is the intersection of maximal ideals in A. Then I want to, if I assume that, then I want to prove every locally closed point is closed. All right. So 2 implies one I am writing. Suppose that X is a point which is locally closed. What does that mean? Locally closed. Again, I am going to prove negation. I will assume negation of 1 and lead to a contradiction. That means, so I am assuming now is negation 1 means there is a point which is locally closed but not close. That means there is a prime ideal which is not maximal. Then, first of all, note that X is open in VPX. It's locally closed. So therefore, the singleton is open in some closed set. That closed set further I intersect with VPX, and then that will mean that singleton X is open in this closed set. This closed set is the spectrum of this ring, residue class ring. And hence, I claim that this is not dense because here is a point which is open and it is not in the maximal ideal. So the maximal ideal spectrum in this ring cannot be dense because this is an open guy which don't intersect with the SPM. Therefore, it is not dense. Is it clear? You see, this singleton is
Sir, could you
open.
please explain?
The singleton is open here in the spectrum. And this singleton X is not a maximal ideal in this. Therefore, this cannot be dense because dense means what? Every neighborhood of every point should intersect with this. But here is the point, here is the open set, the neighborhood of X, and it doesn't intersect with this maximal spectrum. Therefore, it cannot be dense in the spectrum because it is not maximal. If it is not maximal in A, it is also not maximal in this residue class. Right? So it's not dense. But on the other hand, the Jacobson radical of the residue class ring is 0 by 2. What does 2 say? 2 say that every radical ideal is the intersection of maximal ideals. So, the Jacobson radical of this is an integral domain. It has to be 0 because of 2. Because if I take 0, nil radical, this is integral domain. So 0, which is a radical ideal here in the residue class ring, if that is the intersection of maximal ideal, that means the Jacobson radical is 0. That is what I have written. This is by 2. So this contradicts the fact that this zeroness here contradicts the fact that spectrum is not dense in this. Because when it's not dense, that means this Jacobson radical is non-zero. Just it is triviality. Just you think a definition, what does it mean, and then you will see it. You just keep translating one to the other. Okay, recall here. This recall might help you. Dense means the closure is the whole thing. What is the closure of this maximal spectrum? Is V of the Jacobson radical. And what is the spectrum? It's a V of the nil radical. So when is it dense? If and only if maximal ideal is nil, the radical Jacobson radical is the nil radical. Then only it is dense. So here it says it is 0. So it is dense. This means it is dense. 2 says it is dense. And 1, if you assume negation 1, then we lead to the fact that so not dense means this is non-zero. And 2 means Jacobson radical is 0. And that means dense. So on one side it is dense, the other negation says it is not dense. That's a contradiction. Again, I will stop for 1 minute because.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, means means from 2 implies 1.
Kaushal. You are from where? Please put on your video.
I am from HRI.
Please put on your video. Yes. Tell me now.
So from directly means from 2 implies 1, that we can directly prove like that suppose we have a locally
you are giving me a proof of 2 implies 1 alternative proof, right?
Directly. So
that you write we will discuss in exercises. But do you have difficulty in this proof?
No, this proof.
Fine. I would be happy if you write it on the paper and give it to Kriti. We will discuss in a tutorials. Okay, fine. Anybody else? Sai Priya.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, why X is open?
Who is talking? Panashri.
Yes, sir.
What is where now? What you are asking?
Sir, why the singleton X is open set?
What are you assuming? We are assuming that X is locally close point, but
Yes.
not a close point. We are
Yes.
assuming that, right?
Mm-hmm.
This means, first of all, not close means it is not in the maximal ideal. It is not a maximal ideal.
Yes, yes.
And it is locally close means what? There is a
Means
neighborhood.
there exists an X, F outside X, where X is some.
No. Locally close means it is an intersection of open set and closed set, right?
Right.
So that closed set, this it's a singleton point. So this equality I will further intersect with this closed set, VPX.
Acha.
Then it will remain open in VPX.
Mm-hmm.
But that is singleton X.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. Okay.
Fine. Very simple. Yes, anybody else? Gargi?
It's clear, sir.
Okay. Now, there are so many participants, but it may feel that I am only asking these 3-4 people. So I would say you also ask. If one wants to understand, one should ask questions. All right. So if it is not, I will go on. So this,
Sir, just a reminder about the time. Like it's
sorry.
already 4.
All right. So after this definition, I will stop. So this leads to the following definition. What is the definition? A commutative ring is called Jacobson ring if the equivalent conditions in the above proposition are satisfied. What is that? Equivalent, anyone. So normally algebraists will define by 2, that every radical ideal is intersection of maximal ideals. Then you call that ring to be Jacobson ring. Right? And what we proved is, it is equivalent to this condition, every locally closed point is closed point. Now, this definition was first introduced by Zariski in 1951, and he called it Hilbert ring. Why did he call it a Hilbert ring? Because it has a relation with Null-Steinmetz. You will see further also. In the next slides, we will continue in the next lectures. And Krull also defined this concept in 1952. But Krull called it Jacobson ring because it is connected intimately to the Jacobson radical that you saw it. So between the two, I think Jacobson ring is continued further, and Hilbert ring is not so common to call. And why did Krull? Of course, Krull called it Jacobson because it is connected to the Jacobson radical. Now comes the Jacobson radical. This was introduced by Jacobson in 1945. And he introduced this even for non-commutative rings because he wanted to study structure of arbitrary rings. So that reminds me, there are very nice books by Jacobson on algebras. Lectures on abstract algebra 1, 2, 3. They are the best books to read, but now they are out of fashion because I don't know whether they are available everywhere. And the notation was like I am writing these Gothic letters. So many students were getting irritated because they could not draw, etc. I was also one of them. But over time goes, I realized that these are the best books. And I learned to draw these letters also. They are, in any case, they are simpler than our Indian language alphabets. Anyway, so further now I will prove Null-Steinmetz in the next lecture. That is the theorem of zeros that somebody was asking, the strong geometric form. and then you will see the proof is very easy. Okay, so and then some examples I wrote down. So there are still how many slides? Still there are. If you have time and interest, I would prefer you read it and come next time. If all of you say that it is everything is very clear to us, then we can skip it. We will go to the next slides. Okay. So sorry, Kriti, I exceeded for a few minutes. If nobody has any question, we can close down. Still, there are 2-3 minutes I can wait so that you can ask me some questions.